Good evening, bonsoir tout le monde. Je m'appelle Stéphanie Nadeau. I'm the curator of public engagement at the Ottawa Art Gallery, commissaire à la médiation culturelle à la Galerie d'Art d'Ottawa. Bonsoir. Thank you for joining us this evening for tonight's artist talk in conversation with Andrew Wright, hosted by Randy Innes. We're all very pleased to have them both here. L'événement ce soir se déroulera en anglais, mais si vous avez des questions à poser en français, je suis heureuse de faire la traduction. Also, I'd like to remind you all to please turn off your cell phones at this point. I'm making a recording which will appear on YouTube just as an audio, but so if you're not comfortable with your voice being on that recording, just be aware of that. If you're asking a question or whatever, I don't know, just bear in mind. Alors, j'ai dit que je fais un enregistrement ce soir de l'événement qui fera plus tard, je vais le mettre sur YouTube. Alors, si vous êtes pas confortable avec votre voix sur Internet, c'est quelque chose à garder en tête. So, also, if you want to join our newsletter, we have a clipboard over there on the bar that you can sign up. The Ottawa Art Gallery acknowledges the generous support of the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Council for the Arts, and the City of Ottawa. Tonight's talk is presented in the context of Andrew Wright's exhibition, of course, which is upstairs, entitled Pretty Lofty and Heavy All at Once. It's on view until May 10th and will be open tonight until about 9:30. And now to introduce our speakers, we have Andrew Wright, an artist and educator based in Ottawa. His practice is at the intersection of traditional and conceptual forms of art making. Wright's use of photography is decidedly non-conventional. Wright has exhibited wildly and widely, with aplomb, both nationally and internationally. In 2013, his mid-career survey exhibition titled Penumbra was a primary exhibition at Scotiabank Contact in Toronto. He has exhibited at various galleries and museums, including the Jeanne Art Museum in Central China, Presentation House Vancouver, the University of California, Berkeley, Oakville Galleries in Oakville, Photo Miami, Rome Contemporary New York, Arco Madrid, and the Art Gallery of Calgary. He's also participated, and the Ottawa Art Gallery, of course. He has also participated in residencies, including the Banff Centre and Brazier's Workshop, UK, and as a war artist with the Canadian Forces Artist Program. He is the founding artistic director for Contemporary Art Forum Kitchener and area. Wright is represented by Patrick McHale Gallery in Ottawa, and he's an associate professor of visual art and the chair of the Department of Visual Arts at the University of Ottawa, and he also recently just met the Queen. He wanted me to add the air quotes, and he will unpack that later. Randy Innes holds a PhD in Visual and Cultural Studies from the University of Rochester, and he is taught at Trent University, Carleton University, and most recently at the University of Ottawa. His research interests include the history and theory of photography, museum theory and exhibition practice, and aesthetic theory. Randy held the History of Photography Research Fellowship at the National Gallery of Canada, and he has published research and exhibition essays on historical and contemporary photography, along with other topics. Randy is currently with the Department of Canadian Heritage. Please join me in welcoming.
I also met the Queen.
And he also...
1982, when she gave she was repatriated in the country.
Were there air quotes involved?
No, but I should have.
No air quotes, so yeah. Please join me in welcoming Randy Innes and Andrew Wright. I just couldn't find a term. Sorry about that. I don't know, wherever you're comfortable, really. You can hold them.
Well, I think the point is she wants to record it. She wants to hear.
Yeah, the mics are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can we turn the lights down a little? Do we sit up here? Okay. So I think we were going to start with some visuals. There's some moving visuals of the process of silvering, and we can talk about that a little bit later on. And then there's some still photographs that we'll also address from the exhibition mostly.
And some other stuff as well.
And some other stuff. And then I'll see if I can make a couple of points remarks that I would like to make, and then we will open up the floor. Yes, I guess that's it.
I just want to thank you for coming and not going to see Alfred get his key to the city, which is happening right now. Alfred, what's his name? The hockey player. Daniel Alfredson, yes. It's all over the news at the moment. And it took me a while to get here because of the traffic to City Hall. Anyway, so I guess we'll start with some of the video that Brendan shot of the silvering process, because that's it's for my money, it's kind of the more interesting actual process-based kind of activity that is different, that is characterizes some of the stuff that's happening upstairs, and we'll hopefully get a chance to look at it. It seems a little strange in some ways to be here looking at still images of work that's just upstairs, but the exhibition is open, so hopefully we'll get a chance to go and have a look. But this is a kind of a side of things that I don't know, I just kind of find enthralling, and it's a nice entry into this work, because it's very much like the process of making photographs in a historic sense, but yet I'm kind of making photographs on the outside, as it were, sort of turning things inside out, or which corresponds to Randy's argument in the essay that accompanies that's in the catalog that accompanies the exhibition, which will soon be published. So, Brendan, if you want to go ahead. So this, maybe I'll just interject here.
It's during the surface, I know.
I guess so. I asked them when I did this between Montreal and I didn't really know.
If you could pause it just for a sec. Thanks. Do you want to bring us up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how well you can hear the audio, but so I'm trying to explain the process as I'm doing it here, but obviously I'm wearing a mask, so it's it's a little bit difficult to hear. This is the camera that's in the exhibition upstairs. So this is a camera that says, it's called a mini studio portrait camera made by Polaroid. It dates from about the late 1970s, early 80s, and was still in use until quite recently, actually. And it's a characteristic because of its double lens. It takes two photographs at the same time. So this is, we're well into the process here of silvering. The silvering process, which is called spray chroming. Spray chroming is a bit of a misnomer because it's not actually chrome. It's elemental silver that's actually being deposited on the surface. And it's very much like some of the original processes that were, at the history, at the beginnings of photography. So Thomas Wedgwood, who was one of the first to sort of experiment with silver salts and recognize that they were light sensitive. But wasn't able to fix them. He was actually using them in glazes on some of these ceramic pots that he was making. So this camera has been coated with a base coat, which is basically ceramic as well. So the first part of the process requires you to paint, essentially, an object with this ceramic base coat, and then apply a to do a flame treatment, which anneals the surface, and then distilled water to clean it off, the application of a chemical activator with one gun, and then more distilled water to clean off the activator. And I can't really say precisely what the chemistry is, despite the fact that I do have a minor in chemistry many years ago. So after the activator is cleaned off, more distilled water, and then a two-part chemical is added to the surface, and it becomes, so this is the activator being applied, and you'll see in short order the silver actually being deposited on the surface.
So this is, in a way, it's like watching, if any of you have been in a traditional black and white darkroom, it's like watching the pieces of paper, once they've been exposed under the enlarger, go through the different baths that they have to go through and generally, or gradually I should say, an image appears and then has to be fixed. There are a couple of more processes involved here, but in essence it's the same chemical, photochemical activity that's taking place.
So the conceit here, from my point of view, was simply like I was, well, I really like shiny stuff, and who doesn't really? But I also was kind of sort of trying to conceptualize inverting photography, inverting like at a very basic chemical level. So
Removing very quickly.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. It's almost immediate.
Yeah, it's incredibly quick. This is one of my first attempts, and actually it's, you know, the experts at this would say, oh, you're using too much chemistry, you're wasting it, there's silver going down the drain, quite literally. So it's not a very cost-effective way that I'm approaching this, but, you know, I'm figuring it out. But essentially, I was trying to sort of invert a camera. Like, what would a camera look like if the emulsion were to exist on the outside as opposed to the inside? So give access to things that are generally dark and not visually accessible. So this was kind of the sort of conceit of my procedure.
Fixed yet.
No, so the silver is still both chemically and optically active at this point. And this is the very basis of photography, that, you know, really all photography before the digital ultimately is formed because of silver's sensitivity to light. And so this has to be then washed off, dried with compressed air, and then a top coat has to be applied. So I was experimenting a little bit with the time lag between the application of the silver and the cleaning and then the application of the top coat, so that you get more tarnishing, and depending on how long you leave it to sit. So ultimately, an image being formed is really just a question of duration of tarnishing. And so I've deliberately tried to, in places, do it badly or do it less well so that we can see evidence of that tarnishing. And if you go when we go upstairs, you can see the camera. There's areas where there's deliberately left kind of silvered or dubiously silvered, so that you can sort of still see the evidence of the actual object inside. So at this stage, I'm just so now I'm drying it off with the compressed air.
Up to the fixing part.
Really doesn't water, it'll oxidize the target.
Oh, not.
And also make it difficult to clear coat it. Oh. You have to clear coat it so it doesn't continue to tarnish.
Okay, so that's
So
the
it's
fixer.
actually,
That's the fixer.
yeah, exactly, it's photographed in the action. The surface photograph.
Yeah, that's amazing. Eh?
Yeah.
We don't have the clear coat. Oh, okay.
The clear coat takes place a couple of days later, or a couple of hours later, sorry. So I thought that was just a nice way to sort of introduce the project and the show, because there's it's for me, I think it's very much about process, in addition to sort of any kind of imagistic or theoretical kind of considerations, and it's a nice way to sort of see things happen in the studio. And it's very much, for me, it's very much like a dark room without it being dark. which is kind of, well, it's kind of what I'm aiming for in a lot of ways. Yeah, so the images that I've selected here are just some various other images from other work that is also very recent or current. This is a piece called Flare, where a number of, well, I've taken boxes of 4x5 photographic film and simply drilled a hole through them and left them to sit on a windowsill to expose uncontrollably in a way over a number of days, and then the film itself becomes the object that gets framed and placed on the wall. And in a way, another kind of sort of material investigation of the photographic without necessarily relying on the depictive qualities of photography, the depiction itself. They're really stretched, by the way. Okay, so we're going a little over the map, but that's okay. Wow.
Just say that.
Okay, so stop here. Yeah, this is another piece that involves silver. So this work is upstairs, and again, we'll hopefully see it. This work is called Namely. Well, this is an interesting kind of thing. Literally, like the literal title is VIZ period, which most people would pronounce viz. But when you're reading that word, you actually say namely. It's a contraction of the Latin videre licet, which essentially means it's essentially like a fancy colon. Like it's that is to say. So when you're reading it, you say that is to say or namely, and it's usually followed by a list of things that describe the concept being illustrated or explained. And it relies on the stuff that's come before and the stuff that comes after. So it's kind of a back and forth colon. So it's a difficult concept to kind of grasp, but you don't actually say the word viz. And I kind of love the idea of the diversion of the titles, so that you're saying something else or you're seeing something else. So when you refer to it out loud, it sounds like namely, but when you read it, it looks like viz. And this also comes from the idea that I very much try and think about photography, or at least the constituent elements of photography. So how can I make something that is inherently photographic and remove notions of depiction, remove the image? So everything here about this is photographic. There's a surface, there's a dimensionality which is suggested by the actual dimensionality instead of a pictured dimensionality and undulations of the panels. And then there's silvered on top of it too, and there's a suggestion that the silver might contain image information, but it's actually largely arbitrary. And the only image information that you see is the conditions or the result of the reflections in the room where you are. So what you're seeing here in the silver is the room itself, or very often yourself, depicted and distorted and changed. So there's nothing, in my estimation, that would determine that this actually isn't a photograph or a series of photographs. And it's very obviously also in line with the sort of traditions of minimalist sculpture, and I think you've mentioned Carl Andre before, which is not an unwanted comparison at all. And it's also, what I try and do a lot in my work, I think, is to I both identify, challenge, and the conceits of photography, and then perhaps I'll offer alternatives. And so one of the conceits of photography is that it exists almost exclusively on the wall. So this just happens to fall on the floor. The interesting thing about the material too for this, like a lot of people have asked me what this is made of. It's actually not that complicated. It's made with a panel of wood or veneer plywood, sandwiched in between two sheets of kitchen countertop, which is otherwise known as high-density laminate, and there's various high-density laminates that are available on the market. One of them that from a company in Boston called Wilson Art, the black is such that it almost completely matches the black, photographic black of photographic paper. So I was looking for something to do this, something to transpose or to exist as or to substitute for a photographic black paper surface. And I came across this kitchen countertop, which actually does the job like more than adequately. Like, you can't actually necessarily tell the difference between them when you're comparing them side by side. So this is a high gloss version of that laminate. So again, it's in some ways it's an effort to quite literally replace the constituent elements of photography with something else, or that would be photographic, to try and interrogate the kind of the very nature of the photographic ultimately. So yeah, the images are a bit confused, so I apologize for that. But this is an example of some of the previous work that I've done, where I've tried to explore, I guess, the impossibility of the photographic image, or the impossibility of the, no pun intended, oceanicness of the completeness of photography. Its ability to seemingly render impossible detail while rendering utterly nothing in the black. So these are a series of photographs that were shot at the base of Niagara Falls. I think, Matthew, were you there that night?
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. So this is about 1 kilometer down from the falls, and these are shot with very high-powered flash. These are large images that aim to question our understanding of the photographic image and throw scale itself into question. You don't know how big these are. There's a whole series of images that are dubiously realistic, or at least hopefully throw some questionable or questioning into the notion of photographic verisimilitude and fidelity to so-called detail, because they're really kind of impossible images. They were shot, I was literally held by Niagara Escarpment Police. Those guys are really cool. They have special whitewater rescue training, and anyway, so it was quite a frightening proposition to take a photograph itself and get access to places that we wouldn't normally have access to. Now, subsequent to that, there's the whole GoPro revolution that's happened, and so now, and drones. So I mean, there's all these, we have all these accesses to photographic situations, or just situations that can be photographed that weren't available to us even 5 years ago. So in some ways, I think I'm being prophetic. Maybe I don't know. Yeah. So here's, these are just a few still shots of a couple of the cameras that I've chromed. I'm going to the object of cameras and photographic paraphernalia that is deliberately out of date. Well, is not deliberately out of date. I'm doing that, deliberately choosing ones that are out of date. Because they become, to kind of acknowledge their statuses as iconographic artifacts instead of just a pile of crap that we generally put into drawers at the moment. So all these cameras that I'm chroming are functional cameras, until I've chromed them, of course. But I'm even chroming the mirrors in them, and they're all disused cameras, and that's kind of the basis of a number of the projects that I've done. So that I like that word disused, because it's either, it's not abused, it's not underused, it's disused, and I'm not really sure exactly what that means, but I like the kind of openness of the interpretation of that. So here, for example, these are shot in the spring, and so there's huge chunks of ice, and you're never really sure how big these are. Some people even claim that I've staged these, kind of tempest in a teacup kind of thing, but that's, Matthew can attest to the fact that they were actually there. So the big chunk of ice you see on the left, just to give you a sense of scale, that's about the size of a car tire. So these are really, these are North America's largest standing waves. And they're so large that they're beyond the whitewater classifications. It's actually illegal to try and shoot the rapids in a kayak or something like that. And these are just a few upended shots of, yeah, they really are totally out of order. So we're back to the whole drill through film. So I mean, this is kind of representative in some way of what I'm trying to do. I think that I'm trying to, in some ways, collapse photography, have it be self-reflexive, make the camera, the film, the print, the view, all the same thing, so that there's there's no separation ultimately anymore between subject as it's pictured and work as it becomes manifested in the round, so to speak. So this is just an example of the box of film that's just quite deliberately drilled right through and then left for about 12 hours. And this is another project that is similar to that, called Corone, where bits of, rolls of 35mm film are drilled with a drill, and a single hole is made into the film, and then they're left to expose for a number of days, in fact, because the hole is so tiny. And then you get these kind of strange, maybe the next one will show a close-up. No, there we go. So you get these strange, indeterminate kind of forms that are inherently photographic, but not necessarily depictive, which I think is a kind of a photographic conundrum in a way. There's no ostensible picture, except that it is photographic in that it attests to the very kind of effective light on emulsion. And they get variously read as either astronomical forms at a massive scale or as cellular forms at a very microscopic scale. And I really enjoy that kind of interplay between those two possibilities at the opposite end of the scale of scales. So these are large images. Okay. I think it's time for Randy to say something.
Okay, shall I? Do we want to say something? Do you want to say something with this?
Well, this is the final piece. As it, so that's the camera that we saw get crunk. Go back one, Brendan. Yeah, thanks. And then this is a jasperware Wedgwood vase, and so this piece is called. Let me get this right. Disused portrait camera considers Wedgwood vase, and so this is well, it doesn't really. You have to see it because it's also put into a mirror box where you don't have access to anything visually except what's in the box. Everything you see is only in the box, and so there's a kind of conflation of weird sightlines that get repeated and endlessly stated, and there's this crazy back and forth where you see the vase appear twice in the lenses of the camera. The camera itself is looking apparently, but not, because obviously inanimate objects can't actually look. The camera seems to be enacting vision, but it can't. It's actually made defunct by the very conditions in which it's placed. So it was a functioning camera. Sorry about that too. I can't remember who gave me the camera.
If we could just stay on the disused. The interesting thing also about this is that Josiah Wedgwood was an early British industrialist and a potter. So he established one of the first mass production lines for pottery, which is why you can still find Wedgwood pottery for, it's affordable, let's say. His son, Thomas Wedgwood, so this kind of aligns, this is the late 18th century, and it aligns with early industrialization. And of course, photography is very much part of early industrialization. The technologies, the optical knowledge, the chemical knowledge was all present before the advent of industrialization, when all of these things came together and became mass-produced in the 1830s and 40s. So Josiah Wedgwood's son, Thomas Wedgwood, had developed a photosensitive process, but he wasn't able to fix any of the images that he was capturing in his silver salts. So it's kind of interesting to see this late era analog, well, if you may say so, late era analog camera. Weird to say, but looking back at its kind of I don't know, great grandparent in this manner. But there's a couple of things. So I'd like to end. I have kind of three streams that I would like to follow in my comments on your work that you've heard before. So his work. One is where this work fits in the history of photography. The second is where it fits in the history of depiction, which one framework for that is art history. And then the third is a little bit of a speculative proposal or argument that I've made in other circumstances, and that shows up in the article in the exhibition catalog that should be out in April, I think. So first of all, this is photography looking at its own history, and I think one of the reasons that I like Andrew's work, that I'm drawn to it, is because it is very self-aware. It's investigating its own properties, its own histories, but it's not exclusively doing this in a kind of historicizing fashion. In other words, it's not going and emulating old techniques and whatnot, although that's sometimes what happens in your practice. So it's one element of a variety of other things that happens in Andrew's work. So that photography ends up being a whole variety of things, which we already know it is anyway. And it has been since it was first invented. It was snapshots very early on, landscapes very early on. It was used by the police very early on for tracking people down and persecuting people. But it also is very much about its own materials. Whether it's applying silver salts onto ceramics and trying to make them show up as positive images, or any of the other wide variety of products that and processes that came along, daguerreotypes, collodion, right up to the digital sensor now, which is very much in the same continuum of image-making practices. Photography just happens, like a lot of other art forms, but photography happens to have a lot of technical baggage along with it, experimentation, innovation, and all that kind of stuff. Of course, there's been developments with oil painting, but not to the same degree. So I think when Andrew drills through expired 4x5 color negatives, or takes silver out of the darkroom and puts it onto objects, or has these, like Stillwater upstairs, has sculptural photographic works that we have to kind of walk around and experience. These are all very much involved in a reflection on the properties of photography. Andrew earlier said the photographic, the properties of photography as such. And there's contemporary work now happening that's exploring the digital dimension of this as well. And you've had some great students at the University of Ottawa who have started to explore what happens with digital signals before or on their way to becoming images and this type of stuff. So I think that's the forefront maybe now of photographic investigation. The other stream that I'm interested in, and that I think we have to think about to one degree or another, is the relationship of some of these very diverse practices of Andrew's in the larger stream of what we call art history or visual culture. Well, no, art history I'm thinking of, really. And we can start with the reference to Carl Andre on the one hand. Carl Andre was a minimalist sculptor. Many of you will know his work at the National Gallery. They own, is it copper, I believe, or nickel? A series of copper plates that sit on the floor, and you're meant to walk around them. And minimalism was very interested in advancing or elevating, drawing our attention to the materiality of work. So felt, I'm thinking of other examples at the gallery. There's felt, the felt installation, there's the floorboards, there's Donald Judd's spatial geometries. These have a fundamental interest in the materiality of things and the materiality of visual experiences, geometrical shading and whatnot. So I think we can situate some of Andrew's work firmly in the kind of post-minimalist history of art history. And I think it's important to do that because our discourse widens and we have a broader notion of the types of questions that we might be asking. On the other hand, Andrew, and the interesting thing here is that we have moved away from depiction when we're dealing with the material properties of photography. We've moved away from photography's capacity to depict something, to show us an image. And that can be challenging to hold those two things together. So on the other hand, though, in Andrew's practice, there are depictions. There is camera work that results in photographic images that we can recognize. The waves are recognizable. They're hyper-real in a way. They involve spectacular lenses in some instances, with spectacular lighting arrangements that give us a kind of photographic image that is almost unbelievable. And the contrast we encounter there is that we always want to believe that we believe photography. Photography is about depiction, documenting the real, and all that kind of stuff. So when we see these images from Niagara Falls, or try to find the trace of the Grand River at the bottom of still water, of course it's visible, but there's other stuff going on. So these depictive photographs ask us to think a little more carefully about how the photograph is showing us something, which is, we're getting closer to, the in-between side of the coin, if I could put it that way. It's not either or yet, it's how the two sides go together. And then in other photographs, Andrew actually shows us very clear images like the trees that have been corrected, the corrected tree series, where there's an adjustment of the camera. It's all done in camera. The adjustments are done in camera, so that we have, the Georgian Bay 30-degree angle trees growing out that have been corrected to grow vertically. And I think of these immediately in relationship to Rodney Graham's tree series, a Canadian artist, photographer, who took a series in the late 90s, a series of photographs of trees, and hung them upside down as a small gesture, just to get us thinking about what happens when an image goes inside a camera. Of course, it's inverted, and then it's captured, and then we usually present it upright again. So he's done a double inversion. He's given us a positive image of what happens inside the camera, which is of course a negative. And then he's inverted it once again to show us the positive, but upside down. So these little games, these little plays can be, I think, very engaging and very thought-provoking. Andrew does that with the tree series, but also the newer series, the recent series, and I'm sorry, I forget the name of it. The
Untitled Photographic Pictures.
Untitled Photographic Pictures series. is a series of photographs that I think touches on two interesting dimensions of pictorial history. On the one hand, there is the photographic history. These pictures were done in camera, with an in-camera black and white setting, if I recall correctly. Taken from a train, high speeds, a kit digital lens, which are not always the best, but they're okay. They produce results, but they're not super accurate, and then the train was moving quickly. So you get kind of interesting images where the back is blurred. There will be occasional moments of very sharp focus, right here. Is this one upstairs?
No.
This is great. There's a couple of spots in some of these. Occasionally, there are areas in these images that are super sharp, and it's a wonderful contrast to the blur beyond. They're landscapes, which is a familiar idiom for us, and as Canadians, we're always revisiting the myth of the landscape. But they also revisit a very important moment in the history of photography, which was pictorialism in the late 19th century. Pictorialism was very much concerned with making photographs look like paintings, having a painterly dimension to photographs. So photographers who considered themselves to be pictorialists would use soft focuses, or there would be a lot of deliberate softening and romanticizing. A lot of affect would be brought to the images. They would also be lyrical topics. The farmer in his field, or the onion field. There's pastoral, lyrical topics, soft focus. This was a movement in the history of photography that was fairly short-lived, because most other artists had moved into modernism at that time, and were doing, moving towards expressionism or even abstraction in the 20th century, early 20th century. On the one hand, this is a nod back to that period of the history of photography, but it's also a series of snapshots. These are snapshots, which is the result of, it's a technique that belongs to photography, snapshots taken from a train. This is another interesting layer, if we're kind of layering things together. Andrew has also decided to print these at a very large size, one of the largest sizes that a photographic print can be made at. Now, these were printed in Vancouver. So the large-scale print is another dimension. I think it takes us out of the photographic and towards the history of salon and gallery paintings, the classical academic painting, which was typically made to be very big, made for a church, let's say, or something of that nature. So the large scale of the photographic print points us towards a tolerance level in museums and galleries for large pictures in general. And then we can even go one step further there and start to look at the history of photography, where photographs, as they appear in galleries and museums, started to get bigger and bigger and bigger through the 80s and the 90s to today. So this in itself is kind of an interesting history, and it kind of levels the field. It puts photography in line with painting in a different way. I think that was what I wanted to say about those pieces. Now, finally, to end with my 2 cents, I wanted to go back to the silvering process and make a couple of arguments here. The first has to do with an article that was very influential. It came out in the late 70s. It was called Photography on Abîme, written by an American scholar, Craig Owens. And photography on abîme, the expression on abîme means the abyss, to put something in abyss. So what Craig Owens was interested in was how photography has ways of referencing itself and becoming increasingly self-referential. And his example is a photographer who takes photographs of mirrors and people in mirrors. And there's an infinite sense of reflection. These are depictive photographs. They're stories. They're people hanging out in cafes in Paris, and there's a mirror behind them, and the reflections are bouncing back and forth and all this kind of stuff. For Craig Owens, the mirror becomes kind of symbolic on the surface of the photograph. The mirror that is in the cafe that appears on the photograph repeats the actions of photography. So that the camera is capturing the world is reflected in the lens, in the mirror rather, and this kind of goes on, and you can see the folks sitting in the cafe, and then they appear again on the print behind the mirror. So it's kind of an infinite circle of self-referencing. Oliver Wendell Holmes early on called the daguerreotype a mirror, no, he was referencing the daguerreotype, a mirror with a memory. So what's important with these ideas is that photography for a long time has been considered a surface that records an image and preserves it for us. The mirror in the image shows us something about the circularity of recording and reflecting, and here we are, and there they are, and it comes through the camera, and then it's presented to us, and it's printed again in a different context. So this here depiction is constantly holding memory, constantly holding the deposits that go onto the surface of the photographic paper close to it. Here's my last point. That's how they go. What Andrew's work does is he evacuates memory. The silvering process evacuates the memory of photography. Or, if it doesn't evacuate memory, rather than putting it on a beam into a constant state of self-referencing, what I think it does is, and what I've called my little article, is photography en exteris. It starts to point photography beyond itself as a self-referencing practice. Because these silvered surfaces, in fact, are not holding on to any of the memory, any of the impressions, any of the deposits that a piece of photographic paper would hold on to. Instead, they're reflecting the world back to us. And if you haven't seen these yet, you'll see that the silver surfaces are mirrored surfaces. They're very highly reflective, except for where there's a texture or something. And then the silver cladding, the silver chromos, which is skin in Greek, the silver exterior cladding on the photographic objects of photographic significance, let's call them. On the one hand, the object is contained within the silver. I was thinking of James Bond. On the one hand, the object is contained within the silver, but on the other hand, the silver is pointing us out, is reflecting the outside world back to us. And for me, this starts to suggest a way of thinking about what I've called the social life of photography. How, and I don't necessarily mean a social history of photography in the way Martha Rosler or a social political critic would approach photography. But I mean, going back to something that Andrew said earlier, I mean the way, starting to think more carefully about the profound way that photography has shaped how we understand so many aspects of our world for over 150 years now. Whether it's through the snapshot, whether it's through the gallery, the formal gallery print, which really only came along in the 1980s anyway. It's a very recent thing. Whether it's through the years, as Jeffrey Farmer has done, the years of photojournalism that starts to arrange how we understand history. Photography and historicism are closely aligned here. I think this is one of the things for me that the silvering process has done. In these instances, the silvering process is stuck to photography as such. I'm not suggesting that it's reflecting a different world. I'm suggesting that it's reflecting a world that we have learned how to think about through what photography has given us. That's my last sentence. So, Stephanie.
Sorry.
Stephanie has a question.
Sorry, I just wondered, as someone who is reflecting on and writing about Andrew's practice, and you know him personally as well, what question would you ask Andrew? Personal, political, theoretical, to have him expand on an aspect of his practice? What would that question be?
Well, I don't know if I've ever really brought this up or asked you this. I may have alluded to it, but I would kind of like to know, I'm really putting you on the spot here. I would like to know, aside from, I like the variety of your practice. As someone who has trouble concentrating on one thing for a long period of time, it's very appealing to me. I like the diversity, and I think it says a lot about photography as well. But what I am curious about is how you see your practice in the broader context of contemporary art practices. Do you align yourself with photography? Do you align yourself with sculpture? Do you think those categories are now obsolete?
And that's a good way of putting it.
Not obsolete, but...
Well, yeah, maybe not. I've always been uncomfortable with the moniker photographer, because, I mean, that conjures up certain kinds of things that people do that I just don't do. Obviously I take pictures, but I'm not really particularly interested in picture taking as an activity. So, I mean, that's a tough question, because I don't really, the practice of contemporary art, as it's broadly stated like that, is so varied nowadays. I mean, it was actually great. When I had a really fortunate opportunity just 2 weeks ago, just before I met the Queen, to chat with Jeff Wall by myself for half an hour. It was like really cool. He pulled out his phone and he's like, "Hey, you want to see what I'm doing?" I'm like, "Sure, that's great." But he gave a talk, and one of the things he said, he was talking about the whole history of picturing and depiction and the limitations that presents. And he was talking about art essentially now, and he said, art now can be anything, including itself. And I thought that was like that was really prescient. I mean, it was like all of a sudden it can occupy so many different categories, but it's no longer outmoded to sort of be interested in notions of aesthetics or picturing or things like that. So,
or self-doubt, which art suffered from for...
Yeah. So I have no real answer to like how I position myself in relation. I just know I think I'm on the right track because I don't see anyone else doing anything that I'm doing, and I think there's a practice that's like my practice is very heterogeneous in a way, and I think that's a good position to occupy. And ultimately, it comes down to I do the things that I find curious or find interesting, and whether or not that means taking pictures or building something or inventing something with words. I mean,
Okay.
Edita?
Oui, ça vous dérange pas en français?
Pas du tout.
Je trouve ça très intéressant.
Si ça te dérange pas, je te réponds en anglais.
Non. J'ai repensé à Clement Greenberg, puisqu'on parle de la spécificité de la photographie, des propriétés matérielles de la photographie. Greenberg disait que seule la photographie pouvait être narrative. Parce que la spécificité de la photographie argentique, c'est d'être transparente à la réalité. Bien sûr, c'est naïf comme position. Là, on a un renversement de la proposition. C'est la photographie, comme les points aveugles de la photographie, l'irreprésentabilité de la photographie. Ça, je trouve ça vraiment intéressant. Mais il y a un renvoi dont tu n'as pas parlé, Randy, puis je me demandais si tu l'avais vu, ou Andrew, dans ton travail, mais c'est à propos des œuvres que je n'ai pas vues en vrai. Donc, Andrew, tu as fait beaucoup de références au pictorialisme, à l'histoire de la photographie, l'histoire, mais il y a aussi Gerhard Richter. toutes ces images embrouillées en noir et blanc. Alors, il y a un renvoi ici à la peinture, puis dans ces images-là, dans cette série-là des années 80, Gerhard Richter, si vous vous souvenez, il prenait une photographie. Et là, il copiait la photographie, il la brossait pour que ça ait l'air d'un snapshot. Et l'idée, c'était de partir de la photographie pour pouvoir parler de la peinture. Parce qu'en n'ayant pas à composer l'image, en n'ayant pas à choisir le cadrage, ça lui permettait de faire la peinture qui ne parlait que des painterly aspects of painting. Alors là, mais je ne les ai pas vues, ces images-là, en vrai, parce qu'elles ne sont pas dans l'exposition. Mais sur le coup, j'ai des grands paysages, la picture for what's your title?
Il y en a une, là.
Il y en a une? Mais moi,
il va y avoir 5 autres dans l'expo Maria.
Alors là, j'ai vu ce renvoi-là à Richter. Pour moi, c'était évident. Et c'est intéressant parce que c'est un renversement de la proposition de Richter. I don't know if you saw it. And if it's real, is it there? Can you go back to that picture? That photo?
Alors,
C'est les grands paysages embrouillés, là, les snapshots,
Oui.
en noir et blanc.
Alors, c'est
une autre mise en abîme ici.
Mais pour moi,
Ça.
oui, yeah, go back. There.
Ça.
Pour moi, ça c'est la question que je me suis posée. Est-ce que c'est toujours une mise en abîme ou l'expression mise en abîme me trouble un peu. On voit que une forme d'expression nous renvoie à une autre forme d'expression. Pour moi, à un moment donné, il faut sortir un peu de cette circularité où il faut donner référence à ce qui précède toujours. C'est certain que c'est très présent dans l'œuvre de Andrew, mais qu'est-ce que je veux dire? Do you have any comments?
Well, if we're talking about mise en abîme, I mean, I love the concept of mise en abîme because, and I even like sort of the etymology of abîme, because, you know, like it's abîmer is not necessarily from the mise en abîme. I mean, it comes from abyss, but it's the same etymological root. And I love playing with that notion that you could actually mar, destroy, throw something away, that it gives back to you, that it repeats endlessly. It's kind of this like deliberate, destructive echo that gives back, and I love that sort of as applied to picturing. And that's why these are called untitled photographic pictures, because they're largely unremarkable landscapes. They're pretty, boring ultimately. But what I hope is evidenced most strongly is the way in which they're photographed and the kind of confusion and their evocation of a so-called historical idiom. I think that's why I shot them. I think it's kind of interesting that one can sort of just take something or move slightly differently and take a photograph and it can dubiously be a photograph that exists today or could reference something from a while ago. So that totally doesn't answer your question. I realize that. I mean, it's interesting with Richard. I mean, Richard confuses the hell out of me all the time.
Well, Richard's those paintings also, they're concerned in part with photography, but they're also concerned with memory, with with his capacity to remember political events, childhood events, and those types of things. So, in that respect, I think he's not even referring to the depictive dimensions of photography so much as the memorial, commemorative dimensions of photography. So then, and yeah, I think there's probably a lot of ins and outs with this line of thought, but then to go to look at that, at the idea that photography is fundamentally narrative, Greenberg's argument, which I think it's a very limited approach to understanding pictures, not only photography. It's an assumption that photography is always narrative, that the only thing it can do is reflect the real, which somehow is also narrative. That the real and putting the real and the narrative and narrative together is also question. So I think Greenberg is a little bit of a dicey way to start, but I think the question of how someone like Richter folds back to photography and moves between that and a radically materialist approach to painting, I think that exchange is really rich, and it kind of opens things for me. I still have some trouble with the idea of the mise en abîme, because we're never really fully destroying photography. Even the negatives that have been destroyed end up, they're not really destroyed, they're transformed. They become something else, which retains traces of the photographic.
The problem that I have with Greenberg's argument is that it presupposes that there's always a lens. And this is, my friend Reese actually brought this up with Jeff Wall the other night. You know, like what you're saying is that it doesn't account for all the kinds of materially based practices in photography that are in fact lensless, that don't immediately resort to picture.
C'est ce que je voulais dire par les points aveugles de la photographie.
Voilà, yeah.
C'est la démonstration que tu fais.
Yeah.
Il y a une autre idée qui m'est venue en tête quand j'ai regardé ton travail, c'est la notion de sublime dans ton travail.
Sublime?
Le sublime. L'espèce d'irreprésentabilité qui accompagne la notion de sublime. Je ne sais pas si c'est quelque chose que tu tentes d'explorer ou qui... Mais ça me paraît assez présent dans plusieurs images.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. Let me put it this way. I mean, I think when I am being depictive, I am choosing subject matter that is easily recognizable, but is also easily representable, or is easily cliched, put it that way, like thrown into cliche. And the sublime is perhaps one of the few places, let's say perhaps 3-4 times here, that the cliche remains uncliched, if that's, you know, it's because you can still do that. You can still picture nature, trees, and it's automatically considered an undeniably good thing. I resort to using the sublime in a mercenary way. I mean, I like in the same way that I shoot landscapes and treat landscape as merely prop. Partly because there's an immediate familiarity, there's immediate recognizability, that there's a certain kind of seduction of the viewer that I want to bring to bear, so that they look at the pictures or at least feel that they can relate to them on a certain level. But ultimately, they are just props, and I think I've tried to take images that are so-called sublime, but I think I've actually tried to use the sublime ultimately as a prop. So that it's not the primary kind of investigation, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's helping.
For me, the question of the sublime comes up a couple of times when, well, not a couple of times. The sublime that I would think of here would be the technological sublime, and not anything that belongs to any one image or artwork. But rather, and the sublime is an aesthetic category, very briefly. The idea of the sublime is an aesthetic category that points us towards the limits of our being able to understand what we're looking at. And since the 18th century, late 18th or the 19th century, there have been numerous investigations into the idea of the sublime. For Immanuel Kant, the sublime exists next to God. The sublime is our secular God, in a very cursory way. I'm sorry for any Kantian scholars here, but that's the quickest way that I would understand it.
Lyotard disait que le sublime, c'est l'irreprésentable. Dans la condition postmoderne, c'est accepter de rester dans l'irreprésentable. C'est pour ça que je voyais le sublime dans ton travail, pas dans ce qui est représenté, pas dans le choix de l'image, mais dans le choix de rester dans cet espace d'irreprésentable, le point aveugle, la caméra, le point aveugle.
Et c'est peut-être la raison que j'ai pas le nom photographe, parce que ça présuppose qu'on est toujours intéressé à chercher quelque chose qui est représentable, et ça se peut que je crois pas que c'est possible. C'est la raison pour laquelle parfois je fais des objets qui sont photographiques, mais il n'y a pas d'image. Parce que, like, what am I going to shoot? Given an assignment as a photographer, like, I have no idea what to shoot. Like, it just doesn't come to me because there are so many impossible situations that simply cannot be represented. So, I mean, I think I find it more interesting to talk about the notion, that very notion, as opposed to resorting to a very limited kind of, encadrement of un sujet comme tel.
J'aime ton idée du sublime technologique comme expression.
Mais c'est ça, c'est non seulement la technologie, mais la technique qui est toujours le point aveugle de la photographie. C'est toujours là, ça organise toute c'est la condition de la possibilité de la photographie, même des sculptures que Andrew fait, mais on ne voit presque jamais. Alors des fois, quand ça apparaît dans son œuvre, soit comme les négatifs, soit comme le film, soit comme des petites histoires qu'on voit dans cette image, qui suggèrent quelque chose photographique, quelque chose de technique. Pour moi, ça c'est peut-être un endroit où je pourrais commencer à penser un peu au sublime, au grand dans son œuvre, et non seulement comme un sujet.
Pas comme sujet.
Comme sujet.
Pas comme sujet de représentation, comme dispositif.
Dispositif, oui. Cool.